By the time I turned 45, people started calling me successful. I had led global teams, helped launch products used by millions of people, mentored dozens of young leaders. Our AI transformation was becoming a case study for other organizations. From the outside, everything looked exactly as I had imagined 20 years earlier. Inside, I was asking completely different questions. Not, how do I become more successful? But, how do I make this sustainable? For most of my career, I had treated success like a race. Every promotion became another finish line. Every achievement quickly became the starting point for the next goal. I rarely stopped to celebrate. There was always another mountain. One more challenge, one more opportunity, one more responsibility. At first, that mindset fueled my growth. Eventually, it began draining it. One Tuesday afternoon, I was preparing for a board presentation when my smartwatch vibrated. High stress detected. I ignored it. 5 minutes later, it vibrated again. Then again. That evening, I arrived home exhausted. Not physically, mentally. I realized something unsettling. I had become very good at managing businesses. I wasn't managing myself nearly as well. The next morning, I canceled my first meeting. Instead, I went for a walk. No phone, no podcasts, no agenda, just silence. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about quarterly results. I was thinking about my own life. When had I last exercised because I enjoyed it instead of squeezing it into my calendar? When had I last slept 8 hours? When had I spent an entire evening with my family without checking email? When had I read a book simply because I was curious? Those questions were uncomfortable, because I already knew the answers. That weekend, I reopened my notebook. Its pages had become worn after more than 20 years. On a blank page, I wrote one sentence. Success isn't sustainable without energy. It seemed obvious. Yet I had spent decades acting as though my energy was unlimited. It wasn't. Neither was anyone else's. The following Monday, instead of redesigning my team's workflow, I redesigned my own. I created 6 circles on a blank page. At the center, I wrote my name. Around it, I wrote nutrition, exercise, sleep, brain health, stress, family. At first glance, it looked more like a wellness diagram than a leadership strategy. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was exactly that. Leadership isn't performed by resumes. Leadership is performed by human beings. And human beings run on energy. The first change was simple. I stopped scheduling meetings before my morning workout. People thought I had become less available. Ironically, I became more productive. Exercise wasn't taking time away from leadership. It was improving the quality of every decision I made afterward. Then came sleep. For years, I had quietly celebrated sleeping 5 or 6 hours. I wore exhaustion like a badge of honor. Now I began protecting sleep the way I once protected important client meetings. Within weeks, my thinking became clearer. My patience improved. My creativity returned. Apparently, my brain had been asking for help long before I had started listening. The biggest surprise, however, wasn't physical. It was emotional. For years, my family had patiently accepted that work always came first. One evening, my daughter asked if I would help her prepare for a science competition. My first instinct was to check my calendar. Then I stopped. There would always be another meeting. There would never be another chance to help my 12-year-old daughter prepare for that exact competition. We spent 3 evenings building her project together. Years later, she wouldn't remember the experiment. She remembered that I was there. So did I. Around that time, I began sharing these ideas with my leadership team. One executive smiled politely. Maya, this sounds more like a wellness seminar than a business strategy. I smiled back. Exactly. He looked confused. I continued. If our people are exhausted, distracted, anxious, and unhealthy, why do we expect them to make brilliant decisions? The room became quiet. We had invested millions of dollars in technology. very little in human energy. That changed. Over the next year, we introduced walking meetings, protected focus time, mental health resources, flexible work arrangements, learning hours, volunteer days. Some investors questioned whether these initiatives would reduce productivity. The opposite happened. Engagement increased, innovation accelerated, employee retention improved. Healthy people made better teams built better products built better companies. The equation turned out to be surprisingly simple. Looking back now, I realize that the middle of a career is the most dangerous season. Not because opportunities disappear, because it becomes easy to sacrifice tomorrow's health for today's success. I almost did. Thankfully, I learned something just in time. A winning work span isn't measured by how hard you can push yourself for 5 years. It's measured by whether you still have the energy, curiosity, relationships, and purpose to contribute 40 years later. My notebook received one final edition that year. I wrote it in large letters across an entire page. Protect your energy the way you protect your reputation. Because one day, your reputation may open a door, but only your energy will allow you to walk through it. And as I closed the notebook that evening, I realized something that would shape the final decades of my career. Success had never been the destination. Sustainability was, because there was still one more chapter waiting for me. It wasn't about building a career anymore. It was about building people. And that, I would soon discover, is where a life's greatest work truly begins. When I turned 55, something unexpected happened. For the first time in my career, people stopped asking me technical questions. They stopped asking about product strategy. They stopped asking how we had implemented artificial intelligence across the company. Instead, they asked something entirely different. Maya, would you mentor me? At first, I didn't think much about it. One conversation became 2. 2 became 10. Eventually, mentoring occupied more time on my calendar than product reviews. Oddly enough, those became my favorite meetings. One Monday morning, my assistant knocked on my office door. "There's someone here to see you." "Who is it?" She said you'll remember her. A young woman stepped inside. For a moment, I couldn't place her. Then she smiled. Sophia. The shy engineer who years earlier had doubted she was ready for a promotion. Now she was leading an international AI research team. She wasn't there for advice. She was there to introduce me to someone else. "Maya, I'd like you to meet Elena." Elena looked nervous. "I've heard so much about you." I smiled. "I hope only the good stories." Sophia laughed. "The best ones." Then she said something that left me speechless. "Everything I know about leadership started with one conversation in your office." After they left, I sat quietly for several minutes. I wasn't thinking about Sophia. I was thinking about David. Without realizing it, I had become the mentor he had once been for me. Leadership had come full circle. That evening, I opened my notebook. It was almost full. Nearly 30 years of questions, ideas, lessons, failures. I turned back to the very first page. Things Stanford never taught me. The handwriting looked younger, more uncertain, almost innocent. I smiled. That notebook had quietly documented the story of my entire career. Not promotions, transformation. Over the following months, I noticed something remarkable. The most satisfying moments of my week no longer involved products, or earnings, or board meetings. They involved people. Watching Ethan confidently present a strategy to the executive committee. Seeing Sophia mentor her own team. Receiving emails from former interns describing careers that had taken them around the world. Those moments felt different. Permanent. Products eventually become obsolete. Technology changes, companies merge. But confidence, once given to another person, has an extraordinary way of multiplying. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at a university. After the lecture, students lined up with questions. One young man waited until everyone else had left. "I'm graduating next month." Congratulations. I'm terrified. Good. He looked surprised. You are? I thought successful people weren't afraid anymore. I laughed. I've been afraid before almost every important decision I've ever made. He looked relieved. So how do you know what to do? I thought for a moment. Then I answered honestly. I ask myself one question. What kind of person do I need to become for this next chapter? He nodded slowly, not because he had received an answer, because he had discovered a better question. As he walked away, I realized something. Perhaps wisdom isn't giving people directions. Perhaps it's giving them questions worth carrying. The years passed more quickly than I expected. The technologies changed again. Artificial intelligence became as ordinary as email. Entire industries transformed. Young professionals entered the workforce, having never known a world without intelligent machines. Many of them assumed my generation had all the answers. I smiled whenever they said that. Because the older I became, the more comfortable I became saying 3 simple words. I don't know. Ironically, those words made me a better leader than pretending I did. Curiosity had outlasted certainty. One Friday afternoon, the executive team surprised me. They had organized a celebration. 30 years at Orion Technologies. Former colleagues flew in from around the world. Videos played, stories were shared, awards were presented. As I looked around the room, I noticed something unexpected. Very few people talked about our products. No one mentioned quarterly earnings. No one remembered the patents. Instead, they told stories. The day Maya believed in me, the mistake she helped me recover from, the opportunity she gave me before I thought I deserved it, the difficult conversation that changed my career. I sat there overwhelmed. For decades, I had assumed leadership was measured by results. Apparently, people remembered relationships. Near the end of the evening, Carlos stood to speak. The brilliant engineer who had once challenged every decision I made was now our chief technology officer. He looked around the room before speaking. When people ask me what Maya taught me, they expect me to talk about technology. He smiled, but that's not what she taught. He paused. She taught us that leadership is lending someone your belief until they discover their own. The room became silent. I felt tears forming because I realized he had described David, not me. I had simply passed his gift to someone else. That night, long after the celebration had ended, I sat alone in my office. The building was quiet. The same city lights shimmered outside the window that had welcomed me years earlier. I opened the notebook one last time. On the final blank page, I wrote, "Success is what you accomplish. Significance is what continues because you are here." I closed the notebook gently. For decades, I had believed I was building a career. Only now did I understand. I had really been building people. And people have an extraordinary way of carrying your influence farther than you could ever travel yourself. As I turned off the office lights, I realized my WorkSpan trademark was entering its final chapter. Not retirement, legacy. Because the most meaningful work of a lifetime isn't finished when your career ends. It's finished when the people you believed in begin believing in others.